Yes, Mr. Rulofse, you were standing up.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. We are ready to proceed with the evidence of Dr. Machila today. I propose to lead him on the issue of the subscription form. I believe copies have been provided of that document have been provided to the commissioners. I'm just awaiting a copy of my own. But perhaps in the meantime, I'll get Dr. Machila to carry on with his statement until we receive them.
Dr. Machila, you're still under oath?
Yes, Commissioner.
Right.
Thank you. 449. Yeah.
We're at paragraph 449.
449. As regards to a round-robin resolution, obviously the signatures by various executive heads, the CFO and the CEO of the resolution to conclude the investment were indicative of the agreement therewith. The investment done by way of round-robin was not viewed as finally approved until all of the required signatories had signed the agreement with the resolution.
Dr.
Sorry,
Machila,
just before you go ahead, can I just place on record that I nearly said at the bench. Today, there are only two of us, myself and as chair and Commissioner Marcus, Assistant Commissioner Marcus. Mr. Laticha, as we mentioned yesterday, is not here today. Thank you. You can make it.
thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Dr. Machila, I just want to come to this issue of the round robin. I just want to refer you back to paragraph 440 of your statement. That's on page 156, where you said that it was on the 14th of December when Mr. Molabatsi approached you with the AO subscription form in hand and asked you what to do, as the deadline was the next day. It was then impossible to organize another meeting of the PMC at such short notice. I tried to alleviate this difficulty by attempting to obtain approval for the transaction via a round-robin resolution of the relevant PMC members, but this was unsuccessful as some had already left on holiday. That round-robin resolution that you talk about there, when was that attempted to be done?
If I recall, it was on the 13th.
The round-robin resolution.
Yes, if my memory serves me well, it would have been on the 13th.
I think that the document...
Sorry?
Sorry?
Yes, I was saying either the 13th or the 14th. I need to...
Okay, we can have a look at when that was attempted to be done. But the point that I want to make to you is that was a PMC the only way that a transaction of this sort could be approved?
Commissioner, the delegation of authority, I think it's section 8 of the delegation of authority, we can get to that, does give the CEO authority to sign off on 3%, I think up to 3% of the value of the equity portfolio in a listed transaction.
Can I, in that regard, then refer you to page 301, annexure DD 14.1 of the delegation of authority for listed investments.
What's the page again?
301, page 301.
Obisa? We felt that we far from the beginning of the statement and the first file we have left behind in the
I'm sorry, Commissioners.
So the Commissioner doesn't have this.
Should
Can
we
we carry on in the meantime?
So, section 8.1.2 deals with purchases or disposals greater than 3% but not exceeding 5% of the value of the equity portfolio. Just on a rough calculation, how much would 3% be?
3% working on roughly, say, 900 billion, it will be about 27 billion.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, in respect of purchases or disposals greater than that amount but less than 5%, this document requires an initiation to be either by the general manager listed equity, is that correct?
That's correct.
The general manager, what is FI?
Fixed income,
Or the general manager EM,
yes,
which is?
which will be equity, externally managed funds, sorry, externally managed funds.
And it's required to be agreed beforehand by the external head of legal,
Yes,
external head of risk,
yes,
and the CFO,
that's correct.
and you then have the final approval.
That's correct.
Sorry, I'm assuming you mean executive head, not external head?
Executive heads, that's correct.
Did I say executive, as
You said
external
external.
head? I apologize, I mean executive head. Now, this particular transaction was recommended by legal, is that correct?
That's correct. It was recommended by legal.
It had been recommended by the executive head of risk,
Yes,
and it had obviously been initiated by the deal team,
yes,
is that correct?
through the general manager of equities.
Sorry, Mr. Roof, just for clarity, recommended by executive head of legal?
Yes.
Yes, yes. So this will be the office.
Yes.
Sorry, what does that mean?
I'm
When you say
talking-
it was the office?
Yes, because there are instances where they are absent and they delegate to someone else in writing.
It could be delegated downwards quite a
Absolutely.
considerable level when the DA is executive head. Because these are serious monies. Would that delegation downwards comply with the DOA?
Yes, it complies with the DOA because the DOA will say the delegation must be in writing and clearly says that the acting position then assume full powers and responsibility of that position.
All right. Then, so we had the recommendations by those executive heads of legal and of risk. You've dealt with the position of the CFO yesterday and why she was not consulted in respect of this particular investment, is that correct?
That's correct. We
Can you
dealt with
just
it.
refresh our memories why that was so?
We said that just like the CEO, both of us depend on the technical team for advice and recommendation, and we act upon their recommendation or the recommendations of the technical teams.
Did the CFO have any separate and independent input regarding an investment or the merits of an investment?
No, they don't have that. They don't perform that function. Yes,
And then there was yourself.
that's correct.
So it seems to me that if you had spoken to the CFO beforehand and got her agreement to the transaction, there would be nothing stopping you from finally approving the transaction.
That's correct.
So why then did you not just act in terms of this power in concluding the AO transaction?
I think, Commissioner, we have done this deliberately and rather used the Section 5 of the delegation authority in order to make sure that the power is not too concentrated in the shoulders of the CEO. And this has been, a concern and written about quite a lot that the CEO has got too much power. So I've not used this authority deliberately to make sure that I at least, become more, involve other people in decision making within the PIC.
Thank you, Dr. Machila. If you would then proceed with paragraph 450 of your statement.
In all the years I served at the PIC, there has never been a moment where I have forced any of my colleagues to take a decision against their will. We discuss and debate matters in meetings or offices in a professional and frank manner. I subscribe fully to the PIC values, which I was instrumental in creating, and live by these values. This has made the PIC successful in delivery of its mandate. I categorically deny this allegation that I put pressure on my colleagues to do this deal. My instructions to Ms. Khanewe Adams to create liquidity to fund the IO subscription was neither unusual nor irregular. The PIC must liquidate assets to fund acquisitions. It has no other source of capital from which to fund these acquisitions. Unlike other companies recently under the scrutiny at the State of Capture Commission, the PIC does not keep lots of cash in the safe from which to fund its acquisitions. Instead, it keeps relatively small amount of cash and lots of near cash instruments, for example, negotiated certificates of deposit, NCDs, very short-term bonds, and some liquid shares in the top 40 of the JC, which will include Anglo-American. There was a standing Anglo sale process to reduce PIC's exposure following a strategic intervention that started 2 years ago, as previously discussed in the statement. I think there's a portion that we showed outperformance of Anglo, and that is added almost 2 billion to the portfolio. Ms. Adams performed an analysis of the optimal liquid shares to sell and decided to rather sell a portfolio of most liquid shares in order to optimize funding of IO. I commend her for that. It was reported that my instructions to her were irregular. I emphasize there is nothing untoward, it is normal. The PIC has funded many acquisitions in this manner. For example, the PIC's acquisition of 13.9% shares of Vodacom worth 2.23 billion that was bought from government to assist Telkom a while back. Its acquisition of 50% of VNA Waterfront worth 4.85 billion were both financed through the sale of near cash instruments, Pareto transaction, which was about 4.3 billion, and many other such transactions. Practically speaking, its cash is in the form of liquid investment, and some shares like Anglo are just as liquid as short-term money market instruments.
Dr. Machila, can I just stop you there? I realize that you're tired and you've been testifying now for weeks before this commission. You said that the Anglo sale had added 2 billion to the portfolio. Is that correct?
It had added 20 billion to the portfolio. 20 billion, apologies, Commissioner. The valuation from PIC's perspective was discussed by Mr. Sunil Vegas and Mr. Leboga Molebatsi in their statement to this commission. In the appraisal report, the team had come to the valuation range of 45 to 47 rands per share. The PIC paid 43 per share as per pre-listing statement for a 29% stake, thereby valuing IO at 14.8 billion rands. Even though its assets were estimated at 222. This is net asset value of an ICT company is no indication of its investment potential. The real investment potential lies in its contract and its deal pipeline. Therefore, the price of 43 per share was based on the future pipeline of deals to be executed by IO with BT and its strategic partner. From my experience, I was satisfied with this valuation. I was satisfied this valuation was reasonable. In regard to the value of 1 billion rand ascribed to the 30% share in BT, it is to be noted that the draft and final IOPLS contains sufficient information verified by accountants Grant Thornton to calculate EBITDA, earnings before interest, depreciation and tax depreciation and amortization, to value BT, from which an accurate estimate of 30% of BT could be calculated. The signed BT financial statement supported the deals team estimate of about 1 billion for AEEI's 30% stake in BT. The classification of IO as a laggard in the ESG report dated December 2017, a copy of which is attached as an annexure to the appraisal report, which is marked DD65, must be explained. The classification is based on a weighting system which takes into account the various scores on environmental, social, and governance issues. IO's overall score of 40 was 44 and only just fell into the laggard classification. The threshold for this classification being 49 and below. A laggard classification does not necessarily provide a good reason not to invest, because the issues identified by the classification can be addressed by intervention, thereby unlocking the potential of the investment. The key to the implementation of the investment interventions lie with the board of the investment, and therefore it is only once the board has been confirmed after listing that engagement with the board can take place so as to the issues and propose way forward. So as to deal with the issues and propose the way forward. With the PIC subscribing for 21% of the issued share capital of IO, it was in a very strong position to influence the improvement of the ESG score within IO. It must also be borne in mind that interventions for the ESG issues are in general not a quick fix solutions and therefore take place over a period of time. This is a basis for a continuous engagement between the PIC ESG team and the company of interest. The ESG issues were considered and dealt with by the subsequent PMC meeting of the 20th of December as a post-transaction condition. Subsequent to the subscription take-up of PMC LI meeting on 20th December, unanimously approved the investment in AU. A copy of the minutes and resolution of this meeting is attached and marked DD 68. I was on leave at that time, but returned for some meetings scheduled for that day, of which this was one. And Commissioner, I can remember very well, I was meeting with MMI and Department of Monitoring and Evaluation, who MMI had asked to come and intervene in their non-payment by the PIC.
If I can just ask you there, Dr. Machile, there have been some allegations that you came back, especially from your holiday, to make sure that this AO transaction goes through. What do you say about those?
As I said, I was back for some meetings, but the key meeting on that day was the meeting with MMI and accompanied by the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation, who MMI had asked to come and intervene in a dispute between MMI and Makaya. And we explained this in detail that we had stopped paying them because of various breaches of contracts. And so that was the main meeting I was there for.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, can we just hang on 1 second? DD 68. I just need to check something for 1 second. just whether our team could look at this, because we don't have any document in DD 68. Perhaps between yourselves during a break or later to see if we can get DD 68?
Should be the minutes of the
No,
PMC.
it is, our file is empty. Our slot is empty. We're saying we haven't got anything. That's why I was just checking with the judge's file in case it was only mine. But we haven't got anything there. If between our team and yours, we could get a copy of
I've
that.
got a copy that
That's
we
excellent,
can provide
thanks. We
to-
can get it during the break. We don't need it now, but just so that we get it into our file. Thank you very much.
Just for clarity purposes, Dr. Machila, would you turn to DD 68, please?
Yes.
Page 564.
Yes.
This meeting of the PMC was at 1:30 in the afternoon, is that correct?
That's correct.
And your meeting with MMI was when?
I think it would have been earlier than this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Please carry on with paragraph 457.
I think I've done with that one. I think I stopped it. In resolving to approve the investment, the PMC meeting had before it all the necessary due diligence reports and the appraisal reports and had regard to this in approving the transaction which was discussed in detail. The PIC has participated in many IPOs in the last while. For example, CIPLA, QCI of Uganda, RH Bopelo, Kulisani, Gaia, Infrastructure Fund, and many more. This was not the first time that members of the IO deal team had submitted an IPO for approval and the subsequent disbursement process linked to that approval. Nor was it any of the other senior members of that PMC's first radio on an IPO. In particular, Ms. Murray had sat on or have been involved with numerous PMC2s involving IPOs. Every single IPO is accompanied by a JSE-approved PLS, part of which is a private placement application form, which always contains an irrevocable subscription offer. It is standard practice in IPOs for the subscription offer to be irrevocable. The reason for this is that the JSE listing rules require a company in the position of IO wishing to be listed on the JSE main board to have a share capital of in excess of 500 million, as confirmed by the JSE in its testimony before this commission. Plainly, it would be difficult to achieve compliance with the rule if the subscribers whose subscription go towards making up the required share capital are able to back out of a subscription by means of a revocable subscription offer before the listing, thus potentially reducing the share capital of the listing company below the required minimum. For that reason, every subscription offer of an IPO is always irrevocable subscription offer, so that there is certainty about whether the minimum share capital required for the listing has been achieved. That a subscription offer for an IPO is always irrevocable, and that the rationale, therefore, was known to Ms. More, the deal team, and other senior members of the PMC is not least because of their integral involvement in many other IPOs participated in by the PIC, but also because of the fact that each of them had attained a representative status in terms of FIRES. This status requires them to be fit and proper to trade in certain financial instruments, amongst them shares which in turn will necessitate a detailed knowledge of investing on the JSE. But even if this was not the case, and the irrevocable nature of the subscription was something extraordinary and a potential risk, this was an issue that should have been picked up and highlighted by legal and or risk in their respective reports on IO transaction. The fact that they did not do so is because the irrevocable nature of an IPO subscription is such a common and standard listing practice that it did not bear mentioning by them.
Dr. Majile, if I can just stop you there, perhaps this is an appropriate time to deal with the subscription form. I'm going to give you a copy of that, and I believe, Commissioners, you have those before you. You've got a copy. Thank you. So this is the subscription form, which is signed by Molobatsi PP, is that correct?
That's correct.
And yourself?
Yes,
And on the 14th of December 2017, is that correct?
that's correct.
Then there is a block here which details the relevant details of the investor and the bank accounts and the number of shares that the investor is subscribing for. Whose handwriting is that in that block? Do you know?
This would have been prepared by the deal team. The only handwriting from the office of the CEO is my title and the name, which are completed by my personal executive, yes, PA, personal assistant, and of course my signature. The rest is information that is completed by the deal team, either Mr. Siani or Mr. Mulebatsi.
And was this form completed when you got it, or were these details blank?
No, it was completed already. All what's left for me is for Mr. Mulebatsi to sign, and then I co-signed with him. But it was already completed.
Now, yesterday there was some issue about whether at the time that you signed the subscription form, the PIC was in possession of the final PLS. You recall that?
I recall that.
Now-
Let's just get clarity first on the signature of Mr. Mulebatsi. What's that PP for? Is that his initials or what?
Because he was acting executive head of listed investment.
I'm sorry, say that again?
He was the acting executive head of listed investments at that time.
Who?
So, Mr. Mulebatsi. So, PP, in other words, representing Mr. Madavo, who's the actual head of department who was traveling at that time. Yes. But he had full authority to sign off on this,
Thank you, I
Commissioner.
understand.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Now, as regards the final PLS, was the PIC in possession of the final PLS at the time that this subscription form was signed by you?
My understanding, we did have that, because this would be from the final PLS. It's a standard form that comes with the PLS. We were in possession. I had seen the draft PLS already, which was draft and completely different from this one. In fact, it runs into 3 pages, if I recall, because it's a draft, and then this was then eventually finalized into 3 pages into one in the final draft.
Okay, so let's just have a look at what you're saying there. If I can ask you to turn to the draft PLS.
What's the DD reference for the draft?
DD 62,
62.
page 555. if we have a look at this document, it is spread over the subscription form, which begins on page 556. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
And it's spread over 3 pages,
Yes.
which are printed with numbering underneath as pages 21, numbering underneath in the bottom right-hand corners, pages 213, 214, and 215. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Then, if I can refer you to the final subscription form, which is at page 563, DD 64. This is the document that you say condenses the subscription form into one,
That's correct.
and that looks like the subscription form that you signed.
That was signed, yes.
But let me ask you this, Dr. Machila. If one has regard to the draft PLS, page 555, the shares in numbered paragraph 1 thereof are stated to be at an issue price of between 28 and 43 rand per share. Do you see that?
That's correct.
Now, how would one have been able to subscribe for the shares without knowing what price the shares would be fixed at between 28 and 43 rand per share?
The price will only be fixed once the final PLS is produced. So we can only, the price is finalized in the final PLS.
And if we have a look at the final PLS on page 562,
Yes.
Annexure DD 64,
Yes.
that paragraph 1, has now been determined to be an issue price of 43 rand per share. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the amount that has been filled in by someone else, you said other than yourself, as to the total value of the private placement on the subscription form that you and Molabatsi signed, is determined at what price per share?
This will be at 43 rands. At the 43 rands per share.
And that was like that by the time it was presented to you for signature.
That's correct.
Commissioners, I don't know whether, I think that we should probably mark the subscription form as an annexure if it hasn't already been marked as an annexure.
Could I suggest that we mark it 64.1?
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Thank you, Dr. Machila. Let's move on and deal with paragraph 462, please.
Sorry, before we move on, and I'm sorry to interrupt the flow, but given that you have drawn attention to this particular matter, I would like just some clarity then, if I could. If we go back to the annexures and we talk about this subscription form as you have outlined, signed off on the 14th. This was sent by Dr. Machila, as I understand it, this was sent by your PA to Mr. Siani on the 14th of December at 11:44 a.m.
Yes.
So that was in the morning.
It was in the morning, yes.
Okay, and then in terms of the receipt of the final listing, the final PLS, sorry, not the final listing, the final PLS, that obviously was sent by the JSE to your, to AEEI, who were your advisors, and it was only received by Mr. Siani at the PIC at 14 hours 42. So you would not have had the final PLS as approved by the JSE when you signed this, according to those timings.
I don't understand the timings.
Well, the timing, as I have it, and that's why I'm asking you for clarity so that we are clear about it, the timing that I have in front of me attached to this in terms of looking at the records of when these were received, the subscription signed, the signed subscription on the 14th of December was sent to Mr. Siani from your office, your PA, Ms. Hartney, at 11:44 a.m., which you confirmed.
Yes.
But the AEEI only sent the final JSE-approved PLS to Mr. Siani at 2:42, 2:45 that afternoon, after he had received the signed document. So the PLS at that point in time, the final PLS, was not in the hands of Mr. Siani or the PIC at the time of signing, according to these time things, that the PLS, the JSE-approved PLS was sent by AEI to Mr. Siani at 2:45 in the afternoon of 14th of December.
I wouldn't know who else would have gotten the PLS, Commissioner, because all I can say is that Mr. Mulebasi approached me with
No, I understand
the signed form,
that.
so
I'm not questioning
maybe
that.
something that they need to explain, perhaps.
I understand that. The
Yeah.
question I have here is you said that you based your decisions on the final PLS, but the PLS was not there when you signed according to these emails and sending. And therefore, I'm just trying to get clarity on whether you, when you signed this, and as you said yesterday, you based your decision on the final PLS that's approved by the JSE, which was important for the due diligence issues. But this indicates that the signing of this subscription, the irrevocable subscription form, was done prior to the PIC receiving that. Now, it may need clarity from somebody else.
That's correct.
But you yourself said that you had seen and dealt with this on the final PLS.
Commissioner, we're saying this should be from the final PLS, and we have demonstrated that. So when Mr. Mulebasi approached me to say, what do we do? Because the subscription is closing the next day. And he told me that all the work was done, and indeed we can prove that all the work was done at that point. And the PLS, final PLS, has been received because we wouldn't have this form to conclude. We signed this form around 11, made copies and sent it to Mr. Siani. I think it must have reached him at 11:20, as you rightly say.
It's really just a point of clarity that I was looking at. And then again, if one goes back to Mr. Malabatsi, it said that they were instructed to finalize the transaction. But let's go back. This is not, I didn't want to interrupt you, just the clarity of the timing around that we needed to try to understand better. Thank you.
Perhaps Dr. Majile, you can assist. Would the email be the only way of getting the final PLS?
No, it could be hand delivered as well. You could have an electronic copy, could be hand delivered. There are many ways of it. Could be couriered, in other words.
Yes.
So I'm not sure what the mechanics, because this is the final, as far as I'm.
And Mr. Molabatsi confirmed to you that he was
Yes, that's
in
the final.
possession of the final PLS.
And that there were no material changes, except now the price has been fixed, therefore we can transact on that basis.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I got that. Did Mr. Molibatsi confirm to you that he does have or has seen the final PLS?
Yes, the final has been received. In fact, he had signed one form already for 20% without me, and then I said to him, let's increase to 29, so we have, potential of full allocation of a reasonable size, so we can have influence. And then he said to me, it's slightly big. I said, well, if you are uncomfortable, I will sign with you. That's why I signed, as co-signed with him, with the understanding that the PMC will ratify our actions at the next PMC, where I'm the chairperson. So that's what happened.
When you say that Mr. Molabatsi had already signed before, the document that he had already signed before, is that the one that I'm handing to you?
That's correct. This one.
Commissioners, I only have one copy of that document. Why don't you just give it to the commissioners?
They have a copy already. Brett.
So this document, Dr. Machila, that I've given you is only signed PP by Mr. Molabatsi, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you say it differs from the one that was signed by you because it only subscribes for what percentage?
I think it's about 20%, if my memory serves me well.
20%. So that was the initial document which had been signed.
That's right.
And that looks the same as the document which was signed then both by you and him.
That's correct.
And what led to the change then of the subscription amount?
I was motivating him that we should do 29% of the company instead of 19%. Yeah, so that we can have better influence in the company.
Thank you. Commissioners, should we mark this DD 64.2? Dr. Machila, we are at paragraph 462 on page 165 of your statement.
Thank you, Commissioner. The PMC resolution of the 20th December 2017, which approved the IO transaction, does not expressly refer to conditions, much less to conditions precedent.
Sorry, can I just have a point of clarity on that? If we went back to, sorry, I'm just trying to see my own notes on this. Para 456, if I'm correct. There you talk about post-transaction conditions. What's the question of your 462 in relation to 456? 456, and dealt with by the subsequent PMC meeting of 20th December as post-transaction conditions.
That's correct, yes.
But then the PMC resolutions do not expressly refer to conditions, much less conditions precedent. I agree, not conditions precedent because it already happened, but post-conditions are there.
Yes, yes, Commissioner.
So which is correct? There were conditions, or because one...
Yeah,
456 says there are no conditions, and 462 says, 462 says there are no conditions, but 456 says there are.
Commissioner, this will be post-condition, post-transaction conditions.
Certainly.
Yes,
Thank you.
because it's after the transaction.
Sure.
Yeah. Although that impression might be reached on a reading of this resolution in isolation, it is important to contextualize the resolution against the background circumstances. The purpose of the resolution and the facts known to the members of the PMC when passing the resolution. By way of background, it is crucial to highlight that a PLS, once approved by the JSE, cannot thereafter be amended. All potential investors must work from the same document and have the same rights and privileges and are bound by the same terms and conditions as stipulated in the PLS. It is therefore not possible for a particular investor to impose conditions precedent, in the legal sense of that phrase, on an IPO solely for the benefit of that investor. All investors are bound by the same terms and conditions of the PLS, and the effect of the JSE rules regarding an investment into a listing company is that there must be a level investment playing field for all investors.
Sorry, again, just for clarity for my own understanding, I think that that's perfectly sensible, but that does not preclude the question of post-conditions.
That's absolutely correct.
Right? So
Yeah.
post-conditions could be imposed
Could be
as
imposed.
reflected in the resolution of the 20th.
That's absolutely correct.
Thank you.
I think this is covered in 465. So special rights can be negotiated with the sponsors to enhance the risk profile of the IPO for a special investor, as long as it does not prejudice other investors, but at best for the particular investor seeking the special right, the listing company could only give an undertaking, which will then have to be legally formalized post the IPO, but any such undertaking would have to be for the benefit of the company and thus all shareholders. Put differently, the nature of any undertakings given by the listing company prior to its listing can only be for the benefit of the company itself and its shareholders. A put option is a clear liability to the listing company that is trying to raise equity in the form of an IPO. The liability created by a put option negatively affects the capital and may cause the listing company to not meet the minimum share capital listing requirement. It follows, therefore, that a put option in particular cannot be provided by the listing company to a special investor. Else, the listing company has to offer such to all other investors, and the PLS will have to be amended to reflect such. This would be a material amendment to the PLS and will certainly require fresh JSC approval. This principle were known to members of the PMC of the 20th December, which explains why PIC subsequently negotiated a put option with AEI Corporate Finance and not IO. These are basic explanations that my former colleagues should have offered to this commission. However, even if a put option in favor of a particular investor could be legally agreed prior to the IO listing, it was well known to all the PMC that the listing was to take place the very next day, and it was obvious that the condition of a put option, indeed all the other conditions, could never practically be and were therefore not intended to be fulfilled in the next 24 hours before its listing. The commitment that IO will spend money raised on acquisition for growth within 24 months. This is to ensure money spent wisely. It is a post-listing condition. IO implementing a conflict of interest policy. The company can only implement these conditions post the listing. This policy must be to deal with related party transaction. The appointment of independent directors can only be done post-listing, else the PLS will have to be revised and a new approval from the JSE sought. This condition is also designed to improve ESG score of IO and thus pull it out from the laggard status. This will benefit the company and thus all shareholders when the ESG premium is monetized in this way. The shareholder approval for all acquisitions other than BT that are greater than 10% of IO market cap. This requirement ensures that IO will build a robust portfolio that all shareholders will have a say in. This is also a post-listing condition. I place the word condition, conditions, and conditions precedents in inverted commas because the plain truth of the matter is that these were never intended by the PMC to be conditions in the legal understanding of that word. Rather, they were requirements that the PIC imposed on the deal, which were to be achieved post-IO listing. The purpose of the PMC meeting and the resolution was, in truth, to ratify the IO transaction, which it was known had already been concluded by means of my and Mr. Molibazi's signatures of the private placement subscription form on the 14th of December 2017. The disbursement memo dated 19 December 2017, authored by Mr. Siani, is headed Request for Payment of 4.290,54165 million or 4.2 billion in respect of the purchase of shares in IO Technology Solutions, and clearly states the Portfolio Management Committee listed investment will ratify the PIC's acquisition of 99.752.655 ordinary shares of IO on behalf of Government Employee Pension Fund at the next PMC listed meeting. The disbursement memo therefore makes it unequivocally plain that the PIC had already purchased shares in IO.
Dr. Majila, if I can just stop you there. The internal audit report refers to an email by Mr. Siani to ESG Risk and Legal on 14 December 2017 at 6 minutes to 10 in the morning, where he indicates that...
Sorry, can you give us the reference page on the...
Surely, it is page 11, paragraph 6.2.3. That paragraph refers to an email communication from Mr. Siani to ESG Risk and Legal on 14 December 2017 at 6 minutes to 10, where he indicates a decision has been made, and an email communication then from Desiree to you, copying Victor, attaches the subscription form, which Commissioner Marcus has already referred to.
That's correct.
This prior email communication from Victor to ESG Risk and Legal, did you know about that email?
Yes, I've seen the email. I've seen the email.
So they were alerted on 14th December 2017 that this decision had already been made.
That's correct.
Please carry on.
Sorry, just on clarity for that, they were alerted there, but if you look at the block below, it indicates the times at which they submitted their reports from legal, risk, and ESG, being risk and legal being on the 15th of December, legal 8:25, risk 11 a.m., and ESG on the 14th at 5:21. So these were post the signing.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's correct, Commissioner.
Please carry on.
Okay. Am I on 478? Oh, thank you, Commissioner. 476. The disbursement memo therefore makes it unequivocally plain that the PMC had already purchased shares in AO. As a fact, there could be no disbursement memo before the conclusion of a purchase transaction. The following members and/or attendees of the PMC of the 20th December 17, received the disbursement memo, namely Mr. Siani, Victor Siani, Ms. Hanewe Adams, Mr. Leon Smith, Ms. Winfred Sitsedi, Mr. Brian Mabuka, and Ms. M. More. These members could reasonably have been expected to know the transaction had already been concluded prior to the PMC meeting of the 20th of December. The meeting of the PMC took place against the background of an attempted round-robin resolution by the PMC on the 15th of December to approve the conclusion of the IO transaction, which it was known had been unable to garner the requisite majority. A copy of the attempted round-robin resolution is attached and marked DD 69.
Dr. Machile, if we can just go to that resolution. It's Annexure DD 69, page 571.
Yes.
And on page 572, it says in paragraphs 5 and 6 that the committee ratifies the due diligence process undertaken in terms of AO Technology Solutions. 6, that the committee approves a 4.3 billion share purchase of 29% stake in AO Technology Solutions ahead of its listing on the JSE. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Who drafted this round-robin resolution?
This would be from the company secretariat.
Thank you.
And again, just for clarity, I'm assuming that there are signed copies because this is not signed. The ones we have are not signed.
This is an attempted round-robin resolution.
Oh, this is the one that did not
That did not
materialize.
materialize.
Okay, sorry
Yes,
about that.
Commissioner.
Yes, you're quite right. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner.
But it had not been signed by anybody at all.
Absolutely.
Is the suggestion that everybody saw it?
I can't say because they were sent the information. The information was sent to them. And
Sorry,
as I said, a lot
what-
of them were traveling, and so perhaps that's the reason why they didn't respond.
My question really on the unsigning is because not everybody would have not signed. If they had sent it, I would have said, I've read it, sent it, signed it, sent it back. The fact that nobody signed, you're quite sure that they all received it. I mean, it wouldn't have
Yeah.
been completed. What you said, it couldn't be completed, but you didn't get any responses back on a round robin.
Yeah.
Nothing. Thank you.
But if I understand you correctly, you are saying that these people would reasonably have been expected to know about the transaction. Are you basing that on you saying because the attempted round robin was sent to them?
Absolutely. It's also the disbursement memo that we spoke about that was sent to them.
Yes, I'm sure.
So-
I've seen a disbursement memo.
So, Commissioner, these are senior people, and they have people that also report to them, and PAs and so on. So when you send stuff to them, normally it reaches them, one or the other. They get told that there is this important matter that needs their attention. But circumstances, maybe, as I said, quite a number of them were already on holiday, traveling and so on. That's why it was difficult for them to either respond or even see the memo.
So every one of them were supposed to know reasonably that you and Mr. Mulibatsi had signed the subscription share.
That will be now at the stage of disbursement, because the disbursement memo is clear, is directed to a certain individual that should have known. So these are, yeah, Commissioner, 478, these are the names of people who would have known that, you know, we have already signed in terms of the IPO. You know, we have already signed an irrevocable subscription agreement.
I think I know where we are at the moment, because it's the question of Ms. More's and Mr. Siana's testimonies that it was not disclosed at the meeting of the 20th December
Yes,
that you had already signed the form.
that's correct. And we don't agree to that because IPOs are very standard.
No. What don't you agree to?
To the fact that they didn't know, or we had to tell the committee that a form has been signed, which is not. I thought they knew because we've done so many IPOs in the same way.
That's fine. That's fine. We will get to that at that stage. When,
Okay.
but if you want to clear up anything, feel free to do so.
Okay, that's fine. Four, 8-1. Are they ready?
What is the what is at the top of the form on the right top side of it? PMCL 1 or I RRR 001 12 217. Is that an indication of the date?
Which,
In D69, sorry, D69.
oh, D69. Oh.
What is that at the top right-hand corner? Or what does it indicate, if anything?
This is the numbering of the resolution. So there's a numbering convention for each of the resolutions. So this will have its own specific number.
So the 1 to 1217 is insignificant.
Yes. What is important is 12/2017. And that long number will identify it. There's a way they've generated some kind of an index for themselves.
I'm just wondering how the 1 got there.
I'm also
Or
not
is it
sure.
just a number that we shouldn't bother about?
I think the company secretary, I don't think we should worry about it. It's their own index, so to access information easier.
That's fine.
Four, 8-1. By the time of the PMC meeting of 20th December, at the very minimum, no senior person at the meeting could reasonably have been under the impression that the transaction had not been concluded. The appraisal report of the 13th December makes it clear that IO is going to list on the 15th of December 2017, whilst the attempted round-robin resolution of the 14th of December states that IO plans to list on the 21st of December 2017, and both state that the PIC intends to acquire shares up to 4.3 billion in this private placement. Having regard to the fact that the PMC is comprised of seasoned investment professionals and FIRE's representatives who would have undoubtedly have known that PLS have a subscription timetable and that an IPO subscription ordinarily needs to be taken up sometime before the listing, it is simply a stretch too far to believe that none of these members did not know or did not reasonably suspect that the deal had already been done. In addition, and in particular, Ms. Muri could not reasonably and was in fact not under the impression that the transaction has been approved by the round robin resolution and that it needed to be ratified as required by paragraph 8.4 of the terms of reference of PMC. A round robin resolution which has been passed is merely required to be tabled at the next PMC meeting for confirmation. The divestment memo indicated the purchase would need to be ratified and not confirmed. Nor, as demonstrated above, could she or any other senior member of the meeting have been ignorant of the fact that IO subscription offer was irrevocable. The intention of the PMC meeting of the 20th December 2017 was always to approve the IO transaction, although it had already been concluded. The disbursement memo authored by the deal team indicated ratification will be sought, and it was due to a mistake that the agenda prepared by the COSEC and the resolution passed indicated that the transaction be approved. Speaking for myself at the time, I did not see the practical difference between an approval of a transaction post its conclusion and a ratification of a transaction post its conclusion. To me, they meant the same thing. It
I
was
just
only
wonder why we talk of ratification if they're the same thing.
the same effect.
Why should there have been an attempted ratification and so on if ratification and approval means the same thing?
I mean, the effect is the same, in my view, Commissioner.
And one just wonders, Dr. Machila, maybe you're still coming to that, I'm not sure. You have indicated earlier that you signed the form and simply said, or said, it will be ratified later.
That's correct.
And then now you say you always believed that that meeting was to approve, the meeting of the 20th.
To ratify.
Say that again?
To ratify.
I don't think I heard you.
To ratify.
To ratify?
Yes, Commissioner.
Oh, okay. Maybe I misunderstood you. I thought that you said you understood that it's going to be an approval meeting.
No,
At
Commissioner.
first you said a ratification
Yes.
meeting.
I think, Commissioner, we've always been clear that we are going to seek ratification at the next meeting that we could get. A round robin didn't work. So the sequence of events is that a disbursement memo was prepared, and on the day when I had a meeting with, as I have explained, with the MMI and the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation, Ms. More then raised the fact that there is a disbursement memo, but there's no PMC. And then she advised that let's have a PMC to ratify the actions so that they can disperse. I was happy with that. I was also happy if they could disperse on the basis that we can have a PMC later on, but it was clear that it was possible to have a special PMC on that day, when I was there, to finalize.
Right.
Yeah, so it's always been ratification.
Let me get a simpler answer, if I can. What was that meeting for? The meeting of the 20th, what was it for?
That meeting, Commissioner, was to ratify. Yes.
And you attended that meeting?
I was at that meeting.
Yes. But the meeting did not ratify anything?
The meeting approved the transaction.
Yes. It did not ratify a decision that had already been taken?
Yes.
It approved afresh, as it were?
Which was incorrect. It was supposed to have been a ratification. As I said.
That's precisely where I want to come to. Why didn't you correct it?
It never came into my mind that it would be an issue, Commissioner.
Okay.
Sorry, can I just ask one question? If you go to 484, just following on from the Commissioner. On 484, the first sentence, can you just read the first sentence again?
The intention of the meeting of 20 December was always to approve. I think this is a mistake here. It has to be a ratify. Because it was already been concluded. I think it's the same thing. It's
That's
ratified.
precisely what I was asking about.
Yeah,
You're using
Commissioner, is
different terms.
ratify because it says was always to approve our transaction. It had already been concluded. The transaction has already been concluded. So effect of this is ratification. I should have said ratification.
What would other members have understood it, because the resolution is approved? It wasn't a ratification, it was an approval. So the conduct of that meeting and the participants in the meeting, the resolution shows that the decision was approved. So clearly the approval issue was the content of that meeting, not ratification. And being present in that meeting comes back to the judge's question. If it was the whole process and resolution was approval, why did you not at the time say, but we've done the deal and this isn't approval post-event, this is a ratification of a decision taken?
As I said, I didn't see any need at that time.
You didn't see a
Until-
difference between approval and ratification, and therefore
because
there was no
I
issue.
was under the impression that everyone knows that the subscription agreement has been signed because of the nature of an IPO, as I said. It's so standard to me, I thought everyone knows that once there's a disbursement memo, then it means an irrevocable has been signed and therefore the deal has been done. So that's why later on when internal audit raised the matter that why did we approve, and we said it was supposed to be ratification, and then that was sorted out later on formally. I mean, there's another meeting that ratifies the actions eventually.
And you were under no illusion that this meeting is to ratify and it's not to approve.
Yes.
Paragraph 486.
It was only subsequently when internal audit pointed out the mistake that IO transaction had been approved as opposed to ratified that I appreciated the difference between the two, and the PMC round-robin resolution of the 11th of May 2018 noted the mistake and corrected it, which was subsequently confirmed in a PMC meeting of the 23rd of May 2018. Copies of the IC minutes and resolution on IO and PMC minute and resolution of 23rd May 18 are attached and marked DD 70 and DD 71. I cannot recall making a comment to the effect that funds will flow if the put option was not agreed to IO. I think this was mentioned by Ms. Murray in her statement. The future performance of the company was dependent on strong governance and a strong team to execute the deal pipeline. I believed at that time of the investment that IO had a strong team, but the board needed to be beefed up. PIC did make recommendations on appropriate board changes to IO after the listing in line with ESG report, and I believe the board is a lot better than it was during the listing. Following media reports that the PIC did not follow process when investing in IO, the IC held a number of special meetings to get explanations from management. Internal audit also raised a finding in relation to the decision of PMCLI of the 20th, and that its resolution should have been one of ratification as opposed to the one of an approval. The decision to fund IO did not come from the PIC board, did not come before the PIC board at the time of the determination, as it was within the delegated authority of management to deliberate and decide on the matter in terms of section 6.2 of the delegation of authority. But the negative media report has caused some members of PIC board to request that the board's investment committee examine the matter. Management provided explanations to the IC. The IC accepted this and instructed management to rectify the administrative error of having approved as opposed to ratifying the transaction. The internal audit also expressed satisfaction with the decision of IC at this meeting. The PMC LI resolved via round robin on the 11th, I think there's a typo, it's the 11th of May 2018, to ratify the IO investment. I was therefore shocked and surprised to learn that after I had left the PIC, another internal audit investigation was launched, which resulted in the suspension of 2 employees on the basis of a draft report from internal audit. The draft report is used by the board to suspend and thus ruin careers of professionals on the basis of this report, the draft report. I understand the board were presented with the report for the very first time in the meeting and took such a critical decision on the basis of a draft report. I think, Commissioner, you will recall also that there was an allegation that the board cleared me on the basis of a draft report, and saying, but there seem to be double standards by the board in this instance. There is a requirement, according to our board charter, that the board must receive document at least 5 working days before the meeting to ensure that directors are able to apply their minds properly on matters. A matter of suspending employees should have been handled more sensitively and not held in a haste. A press statement on the suspension of employees showed that someone does not care. This behavior is not in keeping with the PIC values. Because I believe a press statement was issued that some people have been suspended. Employees have been suspended of the PIC, which is something very unusual, Commissioner. I believe internal audit has been used like a mercenary hitman to remove employees that were either aligned to me or sympathetic to me. I don't believe Mr. Nemagovani is innocently conducting the affairs of internal audit. The IO share price has not performed as anticipated due to certain aspects of the deal pipeline not having materialized. In particular, the BT transaction and the move of that business into the company. Negative media reports, CIPC notice of non-compliance, and litigation about the company, and even the testimony concerning IO transaction before these commissions have also affected the share price. However, the current share price more or less reflects the NAV of the company at present. In other words, without any future opportunities being priced in. And the PIC needs to exercise its leadership as a significant shareholder in the company to put together a strong management and board in order to start driving the company's affairs forward and to make opportunities in the deal pipeline, even better opportunities, materialize.
I don't have any further questions, Mr. Commissioner.
Around this time, we usually take a break, but the two of us feel that we can carry on. Do you want a break, Dr. Machila?
If possible, Commissioner.
Yes, let's take a 10-minute break.
Thank you, Commissioner.
except for PIC time. So I just wanted to say this is the manner in which it's introduced, and we are about to then look into this document. If we go to that document, Dr. Majila, and you look at page 14 of the document. So, but I'm correct with what you're saying in introducing this document, that you designed it. So this is your document, this is your policy, this is something that you've basically created in order to align processes in the PIC with the delegation of authority. Yes. Your mic is not on, Dr. Machi. So just to
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you. If we look under what is headed aim and objective of the standard operating procedure on page 14, and we look at paragraph 3.2, and I'd just like to read the following into the record, which I'd like you to please confirm. The aim and objective of this standard operating procedure is to provide a framework for the operations of the fixed income department within the PIC. The controls specified in the standard operating procedure will ensure investments are done in accordance with adherence and in line with the legislation and best practice as appropriate to the company. To support this aim, the standard operating procedure will achieve the following objectives, and there's 7 of them. But I'd like to point out the following. 3.2.2, consider solely the interests of the PIC's clients. And then another one, which is quite important for purposes of this transaction, is 3.2.4, enhance the total return of PIC's clients' portfolios. Is that correct?
Yes.
So these are things that you've put into this standard operating procedure. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I've noted that the standard operating procedure is dated October 2018. It seems to have been revised by Mr. Fidelis Madavo in October 2018.
That
Does
will be the
it
last.
materially differ from what would have been in operation during the material time when AO was concluded? That would be November 2017, between November 2017 and December 2017.
Unfortunately, I won't be in a position to provide you with an accurate answer for that, because I don't have the tool. But I don't expect to be a significant change. Really.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Now, can we also then turn to page 18 of this document under the heading Investment Philosophy and Process? It reads as follows in the first bullet: we believe that financial markets are inefficient due to behavioral biases which cause discrepancies between a company's fundamental value and its market price. Correct? Then the second bullet says, we believe that a strategy of purchasing quality companies at companies at attractive valuations outperforms the market over time. Correct?
That's correct.
Then the fourth bullet says, we believe that the empirical evidence of a quality company is one that generates high returns on its invested equity capital at lower than peer group risk. We seek to identify these companies and add them to our portfolio at attractive valuations. Correct?
That's correct.
So, am I correct to understand that this is the underlying philosophies when you make investments in this particular division?
That's correct.
Then, if we can just then turn to page 33.
I think if we can just make a small correction, Commissioner, I think This was it's always a problem with cut and paste. On 3.2, it talks about fixed income department. That must be listed investments.
Okay, thank you. But that is the document as we have it at the PIC, and everybody within the company would understand that we're talking about the listed investments division.
Yes, this is used by the investment division.
Investments. Page 33.
I'm there.
On page 33, it's given a heading, corporate actions, and these include IPOs, rights issues, and book builds, etc.
Yes.
And we're talking about an IPO in respect of the AO transaction, correct?
That's correct.
Now, if we look at the paragraph in the middle of that page, it says all specific deals such as BEE funding or taking up strategic stakes should be accompanied by an origination report that requests permission from PMC listed committee to do a due diligence along with legal, risk, and ESG departments. At that point, the legal, risk, and ESG departments are encouraged, and the due diligence process is undertaken along with the equities department.
I think the word is engaged.
Apologies, Commissioner. At that point, the legal, risk, and ESG departments are engaged, and the due diligence process is undertaken along with the equities department.
That's correct.
And in the following paragraph, the following is gleaned. After the due diligence has been done, a final PMC submission should be made, and that's quite important. This should be followed up by a report and presentation to a follow-up meeting of the PMC listed committee to approve or reject the deal. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Then there's a flow or a diagrammatical representation of how deals would flow, and it gives the following under 5 sequential processes. There's origination, that's number 1, correct?
That's right.
Then there is initial analysis, that's number 2. Then there is first PMC submission, that's number 3, correct?
Yes.
This is what's generally referred to as PMC 1.
Yeah.
Then number 4, there should be a detailed DD process. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
That's correct.
And then number 5, it says that there should be a final PMC submission, and that's generally referred to as PMC 2.
That's correct.
Now, Dr. Machila, this is a document which you have championed, so to speak. There's no reference in it of deviations or ratification. Why is that the case when it, as you've said, enables you to carry out the PIC's mandate, or in respect of the delegation of authority?
Commissioner, as he rightly said, this is my document. It's a process document. It's not a policy, and I have authority to make deviations to it in line with the delegation of authority. Its application is controlled by the CEO. He can make changes or deviations as and when it's necessary.
Now, Another important part of the document that I'd like to just place on record on page 13 under introduction. Do you have it?
I got it.
I don't intend to read the entire introduction, but the following I think are quite important. In the last part of the last sentence of 1.1, it is said, the PIC, as custodian of substantial assets generated by the labor of generations of South Africans' public sector employees, the PIC has a responsibility to conduct its affairs with integrity, transparency, and in an exemplary fashion. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Then paragraph 1.2, I'll just read the first sentence. As a public entity, the PIC is listed in Schedule 3B of the PMFA and thus has to comply with the requirements of the Act. Is that correct?
That's correct, insofar as PIC operation assets are concerned.
Can you explain that?
This relates to the PIC, the corporation, and not the assets under management. Assets under management are handled differently. Okay, that needs to be understood.
I just wanted to clarify, because you had said earlier in your testimony, and this was in relation to a question that my learned colleague, Mr. Munnahela, asked, you had said that the PIC does not fall under the PMFA. That was an oversimplification, wasn't it?
No, the explanation that I made here was that PIC, the corporation, is a state-owned company and it falls under PFMA. But the assets that the PIC manage on behalf of its client is not the PIC's money. These are monies of the clients, and the relationship is governed differently.
Quite correct.
There is a FSCA, the regulator, but most importantly, client mandates that then spells out how those monies should be managed.
Yes, I understood you to have said that.
Okay, thank you. Then just two further parts that I'd like us to put into the record is that the PIC as a state-owned enterprise is obliged by legislation as well as good business practice to develop and implement an effective framework and systems to guide its planning, monitoring, and evaluation practices. But that's consistent to what you've said. But the important part of this document in relation to the AO transaction, as we've looked at, is page 33, because that provides a flow of, a flow of how deals should be handled within the PIC. And Dr. Matila, you've said that you've got authority under the DOA to make deviations. Why would that not be included in this process or in the standard operating procedure?
Because DOA is a policy, this is just a method of complying with the DOA. DOA supersedes this document.
Are you able to point it out, a provision dealing with deviations?
For the assistance of the Commission, it's page 298, item 6 point, no, sorry, it's not page 298, it is,
In the file of annexures?
It's in the annexures.
DD 14.1, is that? No, not DD 14.1, but the main one. DD 273, is that one?
Just give me one moment. Yes, it's there.
It's on 296, page 296.
HDD?
DD, Commissioner, that will be DD 14.1. 14.1, that will be 3.4. Says deviation from AUM procurement policy and guidelines. CEO.
That's what I was looking for.
Yes. My question, Dr. Machila, relates mostly to process and deviation from process. I would have expected that because this standard operating procedure says that it assists the PIC in relation to the delegation of authority, it would include all things which the PIC is entitled to do, or which yourself as the accounting officer would be entitled to do under the delegation of authority. Does the standard operating procedure refer anywhere to deviations?
Commissioner, as I said, it may not have, standard operating procedures may not have deviations because I can deal with the deviations as a CEO. And as we said, this is the document that allows the CEO to run the company, in other words, and comply with corporations policies. So if deviation is missing in standard operating procedures, but is allowing the main document, the policy document, then there shouldn't be any contradiction.
But it's
Can you just refer us back to the exact, which number you're referring to in that delegation of authority? Because it's a different, so if we go, what, it's 5A.
Page 296.
No, we don't have pages in that. If you can, we under DD 14.1.
Item 3.4. On the third page of that document.
And guidelines.
Yes, that's what that's what Dr. Machila is referring to.
Yeah, but is that the guy? I read that as asset under management procurement policy and guidelines. Is that the same thing?
Yes, I've read it as procurement policy and guidelines.
But what does procurement policy refer to there?
How we procure services, whether it's a DD.
Sure, that's services. That's not procuring assets. I mean, that's the way I read it, is procurement of services and the guidelines for that.
But procuring for DD is part of it. We do procure services for
Due diligence,
for
yes.
due diligence at time. And when we feel we don't have to, which is the case with IO, that we have information, we don't have to do that. And when we don't pay, we don't have to pay any money. We can do all the work internally. There's no need for PMC1, in other words. We can deviate from processes if we can do work without spending any money. That's what I'm trying to
Okay,
get
but
to.
in that delegation, it requires the prior approval of the CFO. If you looked at the same column under CFO, B, must agree beforehand.
Commissioner, if we are not going to spend money, I don't see any. in practice, I mean,
No, I'm
if,
only
if
going
we're
by
spending
your
money,
reference.
we can consult with them.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
easy.
only going by your reference. The question is that you're referring to this in relation to practice.
Yeah.
And the practice in terms of the DOA is that the CFO must agree beforehand. So it's just a little confusing when you say it's procurement and it's not going to be spent, but you haven't, your DOA then is selective, that you, I mean, if it requires the CFO prior, then it requires a CFO prior.
I think we spoke about it in the general investment as well, that there are instances where we don't have to consult in that manner. And the delegation authority was subsequently fixed to ensure that, it deals with the functions of the CEO properly, I mean, the CFO properly.
Sure, but at this
Yeah.
point in time, this was in place.
It was in place,
And
but
therefore, I mean, I'm only going by your reference to it, Dr. Mutila. I mean, this is what
But-
you have highlighted as the delegation that gives you the authority. But it gives you an authority with a prior consultation.
But commissioners, I say practically, if we don't spend money, I don't have to tell you that now we don't spend money.
Does the board
No,
know
it-
that you don't actually follow these processes of DOA?
You mean DOA or process, the standard
Well,
operation
no,
pro-
it's the
procedure
question,
that-
I'm looking at the DOA. The question is that when it's, you sometimes follow it, and if it's not practical, you just don't do it.
Yeah.
Did the board,
But-
I mean, the question is, yes, subsequently this has been addressed partially because it's a slightly different thing, because my concern is we're dealing with the process of acquiring an asset, not simple procurement of due diligence. So I'm a little confused about how this
If I can draw the distinction, Commissioner. So Dr. Machila, 3.4, what does, so this authority, what does it entitle you to approve? Yeah, what, the deviation, what does it entitle you to do? Does it entitle you to bind the PIC in agreements without PMC approval?
Yes, I can do that, if there could be a ratification in the end.
Are you drawing that from 3.4? So my question,
I think what's very important here is that there are many steps that happens in this to a point where I can decide not to do something. The initiators becomes very critical because there will be those that says this is what we can do and so on, and a memo comes to me, and we look at the circumstances and say what should be done. Then I approve if there's any deviation and there's reasons why it should be. We could deviate. So
no,
I can't simply on my own deviate on something. In other words, initiate something and deviate from policy, as it were. So I need to explain that there is a process and there are certain steps that need to be taken by certain people for me to get to a point where I say we can deviate or we can do.
okay, perhaps
We can't deviate.
Perhaps I can clarify the question this way. When we look at that investment process, 3 and 5, let's simplify it and call it PMC 1, PMC 2. First PMC submission and second final PMC submission. Where does the procurement of services occur?
At PMC 1.
So
And
that's
this is an approval at PMC 1 to say you can spend money if there's money to be spent.
spend money towards what?
To the DD, to this number 4, to give effect to number 4.
Correct?
Yeah.
Now, can you deviate, does 3.4 entitle you to deviate in respect of final PMC submission?
Yes. If all work can be done internally without spending any money, we can go straight to this process because a detailed DD will be done without spending any money.
No, Dr. Majila, this flow, in respect of first PMC, that's where there is assessment whether there's appetite and to see whether we should take a transaction to DD. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Now, what's the difference between that PMC and the final PMC?
The final PMC is the one where detailed DD process would have been done and a recommendation that says do the transaction is made to the final PMC.
So there we are not talking about procurement of any services, am I correct?
That's correct.
So can you deviate, does 3.4 entitle you to deviate from PMC, final PMC?
It depends on circumstance, because if this step number 4 is done, then there's no, if in this instance, if we make use of IO as an example, 4 has been done. We tried to deal with number 5 without success because of challenges and the deadline. And then I invoke that thing to say, then in this case, we can now buy those services, we can invest, and then seek ratification at a later stage.
So my question to you is whether you can bind the PIC without PMC approval.
Yes, provided number 4 is done properly. Because number 4 is the one that recommends to 5.
So, Dr. Majila, I'm looking at 3, the 3.4. It talks about due diligence. Am I correct?
Yes.
So that's the procurement of services to do due diligence.
Due diligence, Commissioner, it depends who does it. It's very important to understand that who does the due diligence. It's a stage, if we don't pay the due diligence, we are great, because at least we are saving money for the corporation as well as the clients. And we can do all internally to our satisfaction.
Okay.
Then we are fine. If you regard that as deviation because we are not spending any money.
So
You
two,
know,
two
See, I
things.
think council is trying to establish the question of deviation from the processes that are listed, PMC1, PMC2, and so forth. Whether you are using paragraph or item 3.4 as authority for you to deviate from the processes. I think that's what he's trying to understand. It's got nothing to do with due diligence and whether someone from outside was appointed and therefore you could deviate there. He's talking about the processes as they are supposed to be followed, initiation and so forth to PMCs. What gives you authority to deviate from that process?
Yeah. I think, Commissioner, it will be easier for us to look at the overall structure of the PIC, how it's formulated, the governance structure. If I may just quickly. We know we have the board of the PIC with its subcommittees, and IC being the one that deals with investment, and IC has got its own subcommittees that deal with, in other words, the FIBs that deal with different aspects of that. So that's the board and its subcommittees. And then there is the CEO of the organization, who is then assisted, and the delegation of authorities, they say, CEO is assisted by EXCO in discharging his responsibilities. And EXCO has got subcommittees like PMC, listed and unlisted, that will look after investment and other committees. So the CEO has authority over those committees. But in the delegation of authority, there's an express delegation to PMC on certain matters. Also, we spoke about Section 8, that gives the CEO authority in investments, which authority we have not used because we have loved to be more consultative and inclusive in our decision-making process, and therefore we adopted Section 5 of the delegation of authority in discharging our responsibilities. And so, in terms of the standard operating procedures, these are the CEO's instruments of ensuring that they are able to comply with delegation of authority. And that authority means that they can deviate on certain things. They can approve deviation on certain matters. That's what I was trying to...
Sorry, in terms of what delegation of authority? Because what we have been discussing is whether the authority that you say you exercised is contained in 3.4 of the delegation of authority at 14.1.
That's what I understood it, because it talks about procurement and certain guidelines, right?
Yes.
And I'm saying, yes, it gives that authority, because then we can deviate from procuring certain services in relation to due diligence.
I don't have a difficulty with that. If you're talking about procurement of certain services under due diligence, then 3.4 applies.
Yes.
But does it apply? Are you saying you rely on it to, for instance, do away with PMC1 and say it's not necessary?
Yes.
Or PMC2? Are you using
Absolutely.
the same?
I'm using the same to say where money is not spent and all work can be done without any problem, there are certain steps that we can skip. But the essence, what is important here is that due diligence has to be done. How it's done and how we spend money on it, it's another matter.
Dr. Machila, my question relates to specifically this part of the process, of the standard operating procedure, that after due diligence has been done and a final PMC submission should be made, this should be followed up by a report and presentation to follow up to a follow-up meeting of the PMC listed committee to approve or reject the deal. So it's in the approve or rejection that I'm interested. We know that in AO there was a due diligence that was in the process. So you are saying that you could deviate from the due diligence process. That's
Yeah.
fine. What I'm asking is whether you could approve, you could enter into an agreement, in other words, sign the irrevocable subscription form without PMC approval.
And we said, yes, I have authority to do so and seek ratification at the next meeting. Because I'm also chair of that meeting.
But where do you source the authority to bind the PIC without PMC approval?
I thought we have explained that. I'm not sure if the chief executive hasn't got powers to bind the organization in that sense, because the delegation of authority is clear that the CEO is responsible for day-to-day running of the organization, and it's also explicitly say, including assets under management.
Can you point out to the provision in the DOA that entitles you to deviate from getting approval for deal approval?
Dr. Machila, you referred earlier to section, is it 8?
8, Commissioner.
The DOA. Isn't that rather the provision than 3.4?
I think, Commissioner, we mentioned that as well, but it looks like we are not finding each other on this matter as to the level of authority that I have as a CEO.
So
and I think I have authority.
The thing is, you referred to 3.4 instead of section 8 or item 8.
Okay, Commissioner. I thought we had mentioned both of them.
Well, can we look at item 8 and see whether the authority stems from there?
So, Dr. Machila, which provision do you say entitles you to approve a deal?
That will be Section 8.1.2.
And you say that that entitles you then to deviate,
Yes.
deviate
Yes.
process.
Yes, Commissioner.
Now, if we can just then refer to your evidence, am I correct to summarize it as follows, that you were entitled to deviate, there was nothing untoward in this deal, everything was above board, and that there was nothing about time pressure that was extraordinary in the AO transaction.
I think we did say that the timelines were tight.
Can I then refer you to some themes in this transaction? And I have provided you with a timeline which provides a context. And this timeline, Dr. Machila, I've provided to you because, there's a maxim that context, in law context, is everything. And that I believe
Commissioner,
should be true with deals.
I think I went to school to add numbers, so I'll have difficulty with some of the terminology that is used here. But it's okay.
No. My point is a simple one, and that is, in order for you to invest, you should know what the company, how it performs, what's the value, etc. So that provides context. You should know whether it's got a market, and so on. So there's got to be a context in approving a deal, or as the PIC, whether or not you can approve a deal. So the following, and the timeline that I've provided you with is built on the back of the timeline that is in the audit, the final audit report. The yellow parts are what we've supplemented, and the green parts in this timeline are what you've said yourself in your statement. And this provides the context. But just to say in broad strokes, this is the context. We have the Sekunjalo group, which is headed by Dr. Iqbal Survey. And we have what Dr. Survey said in a meeting with the deal team, and Victor mentions it in his evidence, that he considers you a friend. So basically there's a personal relationship. That's what he said.
Who said so?
Dr. Iqbal Survey said that he considers you a friend. Do you perhaps have Victor Siani's statement with you?
No, I don't think I have Victor.
Sorry, Mr. Mahapi. Sorry, I'm worried about time now. It seems you're getting into a new issue.
Mr. Commissioner, I don't know, perhaps I'm not sure, I'm in the hands of the commission because I'm not done.
No, you're nowhere near that being done. And maybe it's actually better to stop here rather than go ahead and leave a particular issue halfway.
I'm happy to do that.
Would this be convenient, Mr. Roloff, sir?
If we're going to break, Mr. Commissioner, this sounds like it would be a natural point in the questioning to break it.
Yes, I think so. You remember I indicated to council that I've got a commitment.
Indeed, so that's why I'm suggesting, Mr. Commissioner, that this seems a natural break in the questioning of Dr. Machila.
Will 9:30 be all right on Monday?
9:30 will be fine, Mr. Commissioner.
Would the date be the 29th?
So,
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
Monday,
29th, Mr. Commissioner.
We'll then adjourn at this stage until Monday the 29th at 9:30.